Folks, thanks for joining us today. We have a great interview for you. We're talking to Glenn Neufeld. He's our FM influencer of the day. He's the head coach for Mercersburg Academy. Glenn, thank you so much for being with us.
Oh, thanks, John, for the chance to come on. I've had a bunch of friends that have done chats with you, and obviously you and I go back a long way, so it's my pleasure to be here.
We do, don't we? So Glenn and I have known each other pretty close to when fluid mechanics started around 1990 or so, if I'm right, at the Petty School. Is that? I think that's
yeah. Because I graduated college in '94, so I'm going to say it was summer of '94 when you needed help with camp, and Ray needed an assistant for the summer with the Petty team.
Boy, did I need help, and boy, did you give. Thank you so much. I remember when we were first doing that. That was camp is always rigorous and tough on the staff. So it was fantastic to have your help. You're amazing, and yes. You've become such an incredible asset to the swimming community and great contributor to giving back all that you do. And we want to find out a lot more about what you do. And what you do for not only just the community as a whole, but also for the swimmers that you deal with, because being at Mercersburg Academy that's a real honor. It's an amazing place. And you've had some phenomenal swimmers come out of there.
Yeah, I mean the tradition at Mercersburg is significant. I mean, and the way that I will always say it and is I stand on the shoulders of some giants in terms of the coaches that were here before. Pete Williams. An Olympian and a multiple-time Olympic coach, John Tremblay, and before, all the way back to King John Miller, in the 30s.
You may be standing on their shoulders, but I got to tell you something. You're right there with them, standing next to them. So,
I appreciate that thought, but not yet. But I'm the lucky beneficiary of the tradition that they built. One of the things I've learned, is in culture in sports is what is your team or your program's culture like. And I've been lucky enough to be able to take a great culture and tweak it and make it mine, from where it was Pete's and JT's before him. But that's something that's a whole lot easier to do than create your culture from scratch.
It's true that it's nice when you have the field's already plowed.
Yeah, and I'd say I've been lucky like that in my career twice, because Upper Mainline YMCA in the YMCA world, where I spent 14 years before Mercersburg, was very similar. There was a great culture. There had been great coaches before me, and it was the ability to tweak that and make it my own.
Petty school, right?
Yep.
So
and that's
you really, interestingly enough, because those groups don't just hire anyone. So you've obviously established yourself phenomenally to get hired in those positions and do a great job there.
I appreciate that, but I just think you and Ray were desperate for help in the summer of '94. But it worked out. It worked out really well for me, because honestly, that launched my coaching career. Because I just graduated from college, was going to be going to graduate school for higher ed administration, which I did. But then I've used that, in coaching over the course of I hate to say it, but almost a 25-year career at this point, because I'm getting old.
It's amazing, right? It just goes by. So let's dig in to just a little bit of the roots of how you started and how you got here, and understand your connection that started you into the swimming world. So tell us a little bit about how you got started swimming.
I started swimming, I think, the way a lot of people did. My brother swam, so I joined the summer league team, not too far from Petty, because I live in that area, or I lived in that area for my pre-college life. So like many, started on the summer league team, and then because I was in the same neighborhood as Petty, swam in the age group program at Petty. When that went on hiatus for a little bit, also swam for the Freehold YMCA, closer to the beach, which is always a good thing because I love the ocean. And then was a student at Petty, and the way I always phrase it, I was on an average swimmer on some really good Petty teams, for Andy O'Hara and for Chris Martin. And I can say that, there are 3 high school teammates that went on to make Olympic teams.
Right. You guys had incredible swimmers.
But the appreciation for what it took to do that, and that Nelson Diebel and Roy Sharp and BJ Bedford are friends, and Jane Skillman, who won Pan American Games and everything. And that has helped me in my coaching career. Because there was no way I was ever going to be that good. But having been exposed to that when I was younger, I have a sense of what it takes. both from a commitment perspective and from the coaching perspective. And that laid the foundation. I didn't know it when I was at Petty as a student or even into college that's where I was going to go from a swimming perspective or from a career perspective. But it's where I ended up, and I can say that I've enjoyed every minute of it.
You were around some of these amazing athletes, you know, that like you said, Olympians and things like that, even in high school, which you don't normally get in many high schools. You're training with them, you are, you know, racing with them,
Getting run over by them.
So who are some of your, and this is an important part, because Glenn, if you look at it, most of our community members would get run over by them. Every single community member for us is very important. And you know, it doesn't matter who's the fastest or the king of the lane speed wise, is that they all have this amazing interest. I mean, you've spent a lifetime in this, and so have I, right? And wherever we got in our swimming wasn't really the instigator to it. Of us wanting to continue in that community, you know, whether we win the Olympics or the World Champions or something like that, that's a real honor. But each person on that team is very, very valuable to us and important, and make a great contribution in different ways. Tell us a little bit about who, since you're around all this, you know, incredible people all the time too, who are some of your, you know, sources of inspiration as you grew up?
You know, I grew up in the era of Matt Biondi, Pablo Morales. You know, those were the big names, and those were the guys that you looked up to when I was a kid. But the flip side of that is, you know, I also look up to, and you did an interview with Rocco Aceto recently. We were talking about that before we went on. And when I would swim in the pool at Petty, because Rocco he was class of 81, I think, and I was 88. But when I was a 10-year-old, you know, swimming at Petty in the old pool at the Petty school and breathing, I'd look up and I would see Rocco's name, 100 freestyle, you know, as the school record holder. So it's, you know, so it's seeing that. It's not just, you know, like the Olympians that I knew weren't Olympians when I knew them. Some were Olympians soon after, you know, as we went off into the college ages.
You saw a lot of that development that made it.
But it's also just the, you know, the names that you see and the people on the pool deck that are working hard. I was not the hardest working athlete at Petty, far from it. My teammates from then, we've shared some laughs that I would have been one of the last ones to be in the seat that I'm in, both as the Mercersburg head coach and Petty's biggest rival, but also, you know, to have gone into coaching as a career. But it's just the day-to-day interactions and being with great people. Because if there's one thing that I've learned looking back at the people that I swam with and the people that I've coached with and the people that I've coached, I've been surrounded by great people my whole career. And my life, and that's been really, really significant. And to this day, I say I'm spoiled. I'm spoiled by the community that I work in, by the facility in which I work that we just opened last year, but most importantly, by the kids that I work with on a daily basis.
I think that you enrich a lot. I know that knowing you, I've always, you know, felt that you were always very, very, like almost overly modest, the things that you did. And I like that. I mean, it's such a pleasure, because you are so good at what you do. And I know you don't take credit, you give everybody else credit for it, but you've done a phenomenal job yourself. What kind of challenges have you had to overcome to get, you know, up to where you are now?
I think in some respects that I've been a little spoiled, because I went to Petty, and so just having Petty swimming on your resume as an athlete and a coach is a great thing. I did spend one brief year early in my career at the New Canaan Y in Connecticut, but then very soon after, like at YMCA Nationals that year in 2000, I met Jim Ryan, who was the executive director of Upper Main Line. And I wasn't looking for a job, but we started talking. He's like, come down and talk to me after the meet's over, because they were looking for a new coach. I went from Upper Main Line, and the Upper Main Line kids that I left and came back to called it my sabbatical year when I went to Alabama. And that was, again, I wasn't looking. Eric McElwain and Sonia Porter were named the head coach and associate head coach, and they needed a middle distance coach to coach the IM stroke groups. And so Eric and I had a conversation. He was honest with me. He's like, Sergio was the first draft pick, and he said no. So do you want to come to Alabama? Went to Alabama for a year, and it was amazing. It's a great university town, a great community. I still have Alabama gear, but what I learned in coaching college at that level for that year is that my sweet spot was the high school age kids. And was able to, just through, happenstance and good fortune, went back to Upper Mainline Y, where I spent another 10 plus years before coming to Mercersburg in 2014. And again, I was happy at Umley in 2014 and wasn't looking to leave. And then Pete Williams and I talked, and he's like, you would be a natural fit for here. You're a school guy. You've been to boarding school. You know what a boarding school swimming experience is like. You've got multiple degrees and this and that, and you're a nerd, and you'd fit in. And it worked really well. I don't know what the pool was like, but I'm pretty sure there were some competitive names in that pool for this job 7 years ago. But for whatever reason, they picked me, and it's, I've enjoyed it, and I've had some success. But I do really believe that it's the people that you're around, and I appreciate your sentiment. But I know that I'm a good coach, but I'm also a good coach that has had good cultures and good environments that were set before I got there. And then I kind of knew what to do with it. And that's, the same thing here. And then having great kids. And when I say great kids, some of my favorite kids that I've coached are not the fastest kids that I've coached. When I think of some of my favorites, I'm thinking of a young lady who once, when I kicked my entire team out of practice at Umley, and literally walked into my office and closed the door because I was just like, okay, you're not ready to train today. And people were getting out, and I heard a young lady screaming, "Where are you going?" Some profanity involved. We have a practice to finish. She was nowhere near the fastest kid on the team. By sheer force of personality, she kept a group of 30 teenagers in the water to finish the workout they had on paper.
That's amazing.
That's one of my favorite kids ever.
That's a great story.
And sometimes it's those kids that help the really, really talented kids on the days when they're having trouble getting motivated. But that's what I mean. I've had great kids, great athletes, but also great kids.
What does swimming mean to you?
It's been a career. I love my sport. Sometimes I'd say I don't like to swim. I went through a phase, like many swimmers, where I don't want to get in. And then when I started hanging out at the beach more, I'm like, okay, I like swimming again, but I like it to be in open water. But I love our sport. I think everybody that spends significant time in our sport has at some point a love-hate relationship with it. So I don't know that I could really quantify it, other than saying there are days, throughout my life and my career when I love it. There are days when I hate it, but you still love it and you keep coming back to it.
That I think is a passion, right? Love and anger.
Yep. But coaching wise, what I learned in going to Alabama, where it was mostly about keeping fast kids fast, is, for me, it's about making a difference for kids. I think that there are coaches that are coaches and coaches that are educators. And that's what probably made me a natural fit to come to a place like Mercersburg, where we're involved in the lives of our kids on a daily basis. For me, not in the classroom, but in the college counseling room, and in my office, because I've got an office where I get to meet with kids and talk about life and where they want to be in their futures. But then in coaching and in the dormitories and in that setting, and you really get to have an influence on them all across the board. So it's not just a sport. We always say that sports are about the things that you learn that you take into your life. And there's no better place, I think, from my perspective, to do that and to have that kind of influence than in a boarding school setting.
What makes that such a unique situation, do you think?
Our head of school, Katie Titus, does a really good job when she talks to parents, talking about why boarding school. Because too often, I think, when a parent says to another parent, we're thinking about boarding school, or we're sending our son or daughter to boarding school, oftentimes the first response is, well, what did they do wrong? Like, what did the kid do wrong? What did the parent do wrong? Why are you sending your kid away? But Katie does a really good talk and a great analogy about how, boarding schools and boarding school environments are really very much like, they're kind of like the last small town environments out there, right? Where if you live in a small town, everyone is looking out for you, for the kids. Like I grew up in a townhouse community where you could wander around day after day and all day long. I'd leave my house for summer league practice when I was little, at 9 a.m. for swim practice. And then I would wander with my friends, go to the pool, and wander in a good sense, go to the pool, play tennis at the tennis courts, and do all the things. maybe we would show up at somebody's house for lunch and somebody else's for dinner, and then you'd go to bed and you do it all again the next day in the summertime.
Right.
And boarding schools are like that, meaning all of the adults in the community are there because they want to be there and they want to be with kids and make a difference for kids. And they want to have that impact, not just in the classroom if they're a teacher, but in other aspects as well. And for me, not just at the pool as a coach, but in all aspects of their lives. So it's a place where everyone is looking out for all of the kids by choice, right? And that when someone makes the decision to go to a boarding school, it's, are they looking for more independence? Are they looking to challenge themselves? Have they outgrown their local school or swim program in my case? Because I think in the 80s, a lot of athletes ended up at Petty and Mercersburg because they outgrew their local team, right? And I think the club swimming universe is so much better now. I hate to say it, 35 plus years later than when I was a 12, 13, 14-year-old. But so they don't need to do that in many cases. But it's still a place where you can kind of expand your horizons, gain some independence. And then one of the things that families discover is it makes some of the time at home more quality time, because the school is doing some of the things. And I'm not saying parenting, although there's the idea of in loco parentis, but that it makes that when you're home on break for a couple of weeks or home for the summer, then it becomes really, really good time with your family.
I've experienced that firsthand. I went to actually 3 different high schools. The first one was only for a few months, and it was a public high school in Maine, because I come from Maine, and then transferred and went to community high school that was very different. It was in a small fishing village in Maine. It wasn't as strong of a background. Then I transferred to Hebron Academy up in Maine, and what a difference in the experience. And just as you mentioned, I felt like everybody was trying to help me, whereas before I felt like it was a little bit of a, disciplinary type of make sure that you don't do anything wrong. And now it was like helping you to do things that would help you, and it was really different. And I felt like everyone cared, and that was such a different experience from some of the other, and there's some great public schools too, but I found it, just like you said, it was the coaches were more engaged. You had more communication. The teachers were more engaged. You're eating dinner and they're there in the room with you, and that's their dinner too. And it's and they live down the hall or, in the dorm. It's very different. And I found from my school, just like you're saying in Mercersburg, that people really are watching out for you, and they want you to succeed, and they're helping you succeed versus processing you through. And it makes all the difference.
Yeah, I think that's a pretty good way to describe it. No question.
I don't know if everyone's like that, but the experience that I had was a really tremendous experience, and it wasn't something I wanted to do at the time. I wanted to be with my friends out in the fishing village, and that type of thing. But it totally changed my life and where I was headed because of that. So I was very fortunate to connect with a great coach and a wonderful team and a wonderful team of teachers. The group, like you said, from deans all the way down, are all into helping kids. Tell me a little bit about swimmers on your team. What do you think the most important role that an individual swimmer can play on your team? So if a swimmer's coming in and you say, hey, this is what I really want you to do here as a swimmer to really kind of, blossom into what we're looking, what would you say?
Well, I guess I think, and again, I think this is one of the great things about our sport and the way that the club system works, or the way that things work at a school like Mercersburg, is that, when a kid comes onto our team as a 9th grader, and we have kids that will come as 9th graders, as 10th graders, as 11th graders. We rarely take a kid just for senior year, but then we have the postgrads. But when I have a kid that comes and joins the team in 9th grade, and I probably have a little bit of a relationship with them through the kind of the recruiting and the selection process as they looked at schools, I like to say I want kids that are willing to work hard and want to get better in all aspects of their life. Right. So when you start here, it's about being a member of the team and learning to be a good teammate. Right. So they're a participant, and then I think over the course of time, they become, a mentor and a role model, right? Which to me are the seeds of leadership, is that you learn to be a great teammate, and to care for your teammates and to support your teammates, and they're there to support you. And this could be the program at Mercersburg, or it could have been the program, at Upper Mainline where I'd come before here. But eventually, hopefully, they're going to be a role model and maybe a mentor. In a full club program, maybe they get to mentor 10 or 12-year-olds. And here, by the time you're, an 11th grader, maybe you're serving as a mentor for the new 9th graders that come in when they're ready. And for some kids, that's earlier than others. And some kids, it's later, and then they become a leader. So it really is, what I want for them is to commit to being the best that they can, to working hard, to being a great teammate, and then watching them grow. Wow. and having them grow through those stages.
And so it's almost like in a canal where they move the boat from one section to the next, and when they do, then they get back to help the boat that's behind them.
Yep. Well, and we want to be careful with that analogy, because then the big boat that just got stuck.
Right. Now I'm thinking about that. Sorry, that's true.
Yeah, no, it's a good analogy, but that's also sometimes you get stuck in life. I mean, what swimmer hasn't gone through a plateau at some point in their career where they're just okay, they're fighting through it.
And that's where many of them don't recognize it because they haven't been there before. And when they hit that plateau, it's such a, like, oh my God, we're right. Anybody that ever got great at something, I think went through a plateau in swimming, at least, right? They go through that plateau. And that's
Absolutely.
The tough part, is when you're like, oh, maybe I'm washed up. Well, no, it's probably just a developmental plateau. Mm-hmm. And you just got to keep pressing in. You do the 3 C's, right? Curiosity, confusion, and then comprehension. You just keep developing, keep rolling forward.
Yep.
Interesting. I'm going to ask you, we're going to go to, and I'm going to share the screen. And the first thing I want to have everybody do is take a look at your beautiful pool. How old is that pool, by the way?
We've been in it for a little over a year now. I guess we moved into it just pre-COVID in January of 2020. So we have not been able to use it for 14 or 16 months. We've been in it for that long, but we probably only used it for about 4 or 5 months.
Can you tell us a little bit about this pool? Because this is gorgeous.
Yeah, that's I'd be happy to. Lloyd Aquatic Center. We've got some great and generous donors, the Lloyd family. Kim, actually, the Phil Lloyd's daughter, is actually an assistant coach at Denison University. She was a swimmer. She swam at Northwestern. Her sister was a diver. And so they were, the name on it is the Lloyd Aquatic Center, 10-lane, 50-meter, 2 bulkheads, great big video board that we put practice up on every day so people can see it without wasting 30 or 40 sheets of paper around the pool. In COVID, we're training 2 to a lane and 16 short course lanes while our divers dive. But it's got all of the things that I think that we want in a pool. I wanted a little more deck space, but there was a physical limit to the spot that we were building on. But through the generosity of the Lloyd family, the Simon family, other donors, we really have a great place to call home every day. I tell my kids that they are spoiled, and they need to appreciate that.
Right, that's just an incredible place to train.
Yeah, and in one of the videos, I think that you've got, on the page that you've got there, down there, I think I actually say when I feel like I'm not spoiled walking in here, then it's probably time for me to retire from coaching. It's a nice place to call home.
It sure is. Wow, that's fantastic. And is that a pool behind there? Is that the diving well behind there?
Yeah, it's not a separate pool, but when in the daily use configuration that we're in right now, we have 3 courses. One is the diving area, where we have 1 lane, just if I ever have somebody that needs a lane because they're doing something for injury rehab or whatever. And then we have the a 10-lane course, and then we've got 6 more lanes on the north side of the pool.
This is a lot nicer than a lot of college pools. That is great.
It was nicer than any pool that I ever swam in, other than for a major meet in my career, until I before coming here.
Right.
It's it's a neat spot, and the way that when people ask me why did you guys build that, again, that's the tradition and the history of the program. I think that's the resources that we have, which are significant. Right. But it's also, for me, it's just the commitment of the school to the swim program. I think when you're a parent and whatever your kid does, if they're dancing, if they're swimming, if they're doing gymnastics, wherever they are, school-wise or institution-wise, you want to know that place is committed to having a great program. Mm-hmm. And for us, the living proof, I don't ever have to say Mercersburg supports swimming. I just have to say, look at our pool.
Look at our pool. You get the idea right there.
Yeah. Um,
I remember the pool we had was I think it was a 4-lane pool, if I'm right. And it was, there was about, in some areas, about 1 foot between the end of the pool, if I'm right, maybe a little bit more than that, 2 or 3 feet, and the wall. And there was no ventilation. It was a giant high ceiling, but there's no ventilation at all. And so
mhm.
you literally have to go over to the wall when it was cold so you could actually breathe, because there's so much chlorine that was built up in there. And everybody had their lips within like 2 inches of the wall because it was colder. They thought you could breathe better.
Yeah, I've swum in some pools like that in my career, a long time ago, but yeah, I got that. I've been there.
Wow. Oh, there you are right there. Fantastic. We just want to kind of show the different layers that we see of swimming. On the top here, we have the scientists and the doctors and things like that are discovering new information. A group like ours, fluid mechanics, we would be then interpreting that information, kind of sifting through some of that, taking it and putting it into presentation. So we would kind of stand between the coaches and those scientists saying, look, let us look through this and try to find out what is easy to apply and will work in programs. Because the coach does that, there's so much research they got to sift through. That would be their full-time job, right? And then what we do is we deliver it in a very visual way. So it's easy, fast delivery, and then people can choose what they want to teach very quickly. When we get to this level here with the coach, and you can see the coach and the swimmer. So we're getting it from the deck. We're trying to get it to the deck and into the swimmer. So we actually work with swimmers as well as with coaches to help them understand visually what this is, what they can do to improve. And coaches are the ones that apply it. They make sure those swimmers are, getting the message clearly. They get the relationship with that swimmer and really make sure things work. And so that's where the rubber meets the road, between the coach and the swimmer, and between the swimmer and the water itself, like the hydrodynamics of it, things like this. And this is really important that we get that information. And you're on the front line with that, Glenn, making sure that you have that relationship, the connection to the swimmer. Because if you don't have connection, then the development cycle is very hard to move forward. And once you have that great connection, I think that's your personality. It would fit and does fit so well into that situation, because kids and everybody seems to trust you tremendously. You're a person that really attracts that. And obviously you can see that, you develop that with the people that, and the programs you've been involved with and people that trust you so much. So those swimmers are getting such a benefit from that ability for you to connect how knowledgeable you are, and then what you bring into that program and get into the water, because if that relationship's not there, it doesn't flow as easily. So now, based on that experience that you've had and what we've heard so far, looking at the cornerstones of athletic performance, real quick refresher for anybody that hasn't seen this. On the left in the green, you have the fuels like sleep, hydration, nutrition, and oxygen. Those fuels are like consumables that flow through the energy systems. You have the one that builds endurance, the one that builds speed, and the one that builds explosive motion, like leaping off blocks, leaping off the walls, things like this. And those fuels flow through those energy systems, depending on what you're doing, to the muscle. The muscle then contracts using that energy around the bones. The bones are technique. This blue guy up here, and that's how your skeletal system moves, is that right? And then the bones and the skeleton get you to where you want to go. And the whole question is, do you know where you want to go and how to get there? And that would be the brain or the mind up here. Synergy is how you put it all together. So racing is a form of synergy. Converting your swimming into maybe a college career is a different form of synergy. So turning it over to you, Glenn, tell me what your opinion is. They're all important, but what's the most, or one of the most significant for you?
I mean, without question, it would be the brain for me. We were talking before about, where do you fit as a coach? The scientist coach, the psychologist coach, the artist coach. To me, those all start with the brain. And it's the same for the athlete, because if you don't have the brain, making the choice, saying, I want to swim, and then I really want to do the best that I can. And it all starts in between the ears, I guess is the saying. And I think in many sports, coaches and others will advocate that, it's 90% mental and 10% physical. It might not be 90-10, but I think that everything starts from your brain, and and the choices that you make and the things that you desire and want to do.
So fluid mechanics has an absolute agreement with that as well. We built an entire program called MindWorks. We've presented to the Navy SEALs. We presented down in SOCOM. We work with special forces, but for that. But one of the things that we specifically built it for, and this is where it started, was for swimmers, because swimmers, right? It's for people that really, really want to get great at something. So we work on focus. If you could focus better, your team could focus better. How important would that be, for instance, to a Navy SEAL?
Having known a couple guys that are in the teams, the ability to focus is an incredible thing.
Right.
Whether short term, long term, the mountains that those guys, have to climb and the hurdles to do the things that they do. If they weren't mentally and emotionally committed to doing them, you could have all the physical tools in the world. But if you don't have that commitment, it's not going to happen.
Right. So if we can increase focus, right, and you're looking at that, and then the next step is we look at emotion, how to harness your emotion, right, to have your emotion help you instead of hurt you, which a lot of times you might have the physical capability, but all of a sudden you're emotionally being held back, or to not do anything for you. It's to actually harness that emotion to drive you forward. And the third thing is what's called progress, and how to progress and get more traction moving forward and trying to get whatever it is that you want to accomplish. So it's not really just about swimming. It's a global concept. But if your athletes were able to focus better, harness their emotion to help them, and progress at a more effective rate, what do you see there? Right.
I see success, and that success not just in the swim part of their life, but in multiple aspects of their lives and universes.
And that's what we see too. As I think and we noticed years and years of training. I don't think we had it nearly as much when we were together. We started to notice something when we were training athletes, is that everything comes out of the mind. Everything, your motivation, your excitement, your focus, everything else just follows what that mind wants to do. Yep. And so it's such a big deal. And then when you look at programs like yours that are so there's so much that it offers. And I'm going to say that, that's one of the big things that, are tremendous aspects. So here we are in my fast track, FM fast track, and we have calculators. Then we have presentations, courses like the MindWorks program, strength and energy systems, and then resources. And we've all kinds of different resources we got in there. Tell us what you found would be interesting.
I mean, there's a ton of stuff in there. And honestly, in my looking, John, I haven't had a chance yet to do much more than scratch the surface.
Right.
But some of the things that jump out at me is just really easy to use. On the screen that you're on now, the time zone thing, I think is a wonderful tool. It's really simple, but I think how oftentimes do you work with athletes as a coach in our sport and talk about pace numbers and where you want to be, and too often kids are like, well, I don't know what my pace should be. Can you tell me? And I'm like, well, no, I want you to try to figure out what your pace should be. And it's not, I want to go a minute in the 100 free, so it's 15 seconds per lap. It's, how does that come together, right? Just so that they have the knowledge base of, well, if we're going 200 pace work, here's where I want to be. And then the difference between goal pace and meet pace. So it's all stuff in there to help them figure that out, right? And it might not be perfect for every kid, but this gives kids a visual reference point, in terms of about where they should be. And then they can say, I'm a little more front end or a little more back end, and make the adjustments. But right. It gives them the ability to do that. And I like that, because again, different strokes are different, and you guys have accounted for some of that in there. And it helps give kids a really good baseline, and that can be a valuable tool. It's before, your version, if you're lucky enough to have known, John Urbanchik or Jim Richardson, you can get the pace charts that they created and used, and they're great. But this is one that's easy access. You don't need to have, John's number or Jim's number in your phone to be able to pull that off.
Right. Exactly.
So,
yeah.
So the next one, like when we were talking, and again, there's two in here that I think can be pretty useful. And I'll preface the first statement with, I am 10% a scientist and 90% an artist and a psychologist as a coach. When I say 10% of the science, it just means I have enough education and background to understand some of the science. I'm not someone that's going to do lactate testing on the pool deck or stuff like that. But I think the animations are really good because they show some of the science, but they're also really good for, as an educator, kids that are visual, to be able to see this is what we want you to do. It's basic movements, but that's what our sport is, a bunch of basic movements tied in together. So the ability to show them some of that, I think, can be a really, really nice thing, especially for, like I said, that kid that's a visual learner. It's a neat thing.
And it shows you different aspects like the hydrodynamics and different, right? So you can see the water and how it works with what you're doing.
Or you can see, I talk a lot about using the hand and the forearm as the paddle, and you can see right there where the paddle is, right? And I think that's a nice cue and visual reference. The other thing they have in there is just a lot of information, like in all the presentations. And I haven't played with the search engine yet, but I know that, that you can go in and you can search stuff. So maybe someone eventually says, well, like, I want to learn more about boarding schools, and they search that out and they find, where I talk about boarding schools. But so many topics that can be useful to so many people.
Right. You can see the interviews, things like that right in here.
Yep.
And this interview will be in there. And this is the tricky part. See this little arrow here? There you can get to anything you want real quick, and you can just click them here and see all the different programs. So it's very easy to get into. But for instance, in your case, you were saying you might be able to contribute more information about, in some of the programs that you've developed that will help people, learn more about boarding schools, things like that. And they can just look it up by typing that right in there. It makes it easy. And there's, I think right now we have something like 300 or 400 now, different bits of information. And one of the things that we're doing, Glenn, on this, that we're working on right now is what's called team education, it's a team presentation area. So you as a coach will be able to design your own and select the ones you want for different groups, and also put your own in there. So that's going to be created. We're going to be working on that. And that way you can build your own program. Like you said, for each level, when people come into your program, you can say, if you're a freshman, I want you to watch these things and in this order. And if you're a sophomore, I want you in this group. Or if you're a NIAMer, I want you to watch these, and build your own groups and make your own presentation. And then you can add your own, because a lot of people don't have an easy system or platform to put that in. So we're creating this platform for our coaches to work with their swimmers.
Well, and I think it's awesome because it's good information, and there's not enough time at swim practice to get it all in. Right. So anytime we can have a resource like that for good information, that's a wonderful thing.
And you can imagine also, I'm thinking about this, Glenn, is let's say a coach retires. That whole program is still in there for their team. So the new coach can come in, take a look at what they were doing, and make adjustments to what they want to do now.
Yeah, it's a good thought.
Right. That's a big deal.
Yeah. Well, institutional knowledge, and we want to have that kind of knowledge base. So absolutely.
Right. Passing that on, and if you, like you're talking about, if you imagine if we went back farther, you had JT's program still in there, and each one of them just builds on top of it. It's amazing. And the other thing, Glenn, too, is when you have built something that you've put in there that you think would be like really great to share with the entire swimming community, you can actually just click a button and ask our content director to make it available to everyone. Imagine the amount of content that's going to be coming in to help kids.
Right. I like it a lot.
What message do you have for our younger community members that are traveling along their swimming pathway today? You like to say, you know what, here's something that I think that you really want to make sure that you're following.
I mean, I guess for me, it would be something that applies to swimming and to life and education in general, which is figure out the things that you're excited about. And that's the road that you go down. And that might mean over time we lose a couple of swimmers because they discover something else. But you want to do the things that you're excited about, right? And you want you want to be excited to go to swim practice, and you want to be excited to go to school. And yes, in fifth grade, you don't have a whole lot of options on what your courses are going to be, but as you get to high school and get the ability to follow the path that is the one that you're excited and passionate about, I would just say, follow your passions so that you can be excited about the things that you're doing every day, because then work does not become work, and school is a lot less like school when you're doing the things that you're excited to do. So that would be the piece of advice. And then whatever you decide to do, dive in and commit yourself. Whether
So
that is
passion
swimming.
is very important in life.
Be excited, be passionate about the things that you do. And then maybe you're one of those people that's lucky enough that later in your life, your job isn't really that much of a job because it's exciting every day. I get to say, when someone says, hey, what do you do for a living? I can say, well, generically, half my days I help kids find colleges and figure out where they want to be. And half the day I coach a sport that I love and I hate. Mostly love, but occasionally hate. And that's a pretty good way to go through life.
Right.
And I think if you can get to the point where you're doing the things that make you happy and that you're excited about for your work, then it's a pretty good existence, I guess.
Yeah, I think just along those lines, it seems like passion builds performance, and then performance builds passion.
Yep.
But I think the passion's where it starts, right?
Yeah. But that's a really good loop to get into.
Sure is. Thank you so much for joining us. It's such a valuable lesson that people learn from you. So again, thank you for helping us all, and really appreciate you being here today.
No, thanks, John. It's been a pleasure being here. And, this is, when you asked me to do it, I was like, well, you guys were there at the start of my career. So it's always a pleasure to connect and see you and do something like this. So thanks for having me.